Airing on Asheville FM 103.3 LPFM in Asheville, this is The Final Straw Radio, a weekly anarchist and anti-authoritarian broadcasts and podcast emanating out of occupied Chalagi land in southern Appalachia. We bring you voices and perspectives from projects and struggles all around the world, and you can find our archives, transcripts, ways to follow us and support us at thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org. In this episode, you'll hear Cedric and Kuzama, two libertarian communists with connections to Syria and editor-contributors to the blog interstices-fajawat.org, speaking about their observations of what's been going on leading to and up through the ouster of Bashar al-Assad, as well as complications among various factions on the ground and the view from the Syrian diaspora. The situation on the ground is changing fast, so check the show notes for this episode on our website for links to news sources that could be helpful in keeping up. And if you care to hear a perspective from an anarchist combatant affiliated with Tekoshina Anarchist, which works with the Autonomous Administration of North and East Syria, affiliated with the SDF and the Rajava Revolution, you can find our episode from December 22nd, and the transcribed zine is already online at our website.
My name is Kuzama. I come from Syria, from the southern part of Syria, a city called Sueda. Now I am, for the moment, since 4 years, I'm living in Europe, and I co-created the collective Interstices Fajawat with my partner, Cedric. And just to say a bit, when I was in Syria, did not consider myself to be an activist, a political activist, but I consider myself just someone who's trying to, transfer the voice of the cases that I believe in it. I was participating in the revolution in Syria. And for the moment, I can describe myself as a libertarian communist. Cedric, it's for you.
Yeah, I'm Cedric. So I'm more born in France and still living in Europe. And with Kuzama, we are partners now since 2019. And I was involved in the anarchist movement and libertarian communists. I would also define me as a libertarian communist, but more in France and Europe, but on international anti-racist, decolonial questions and against police brutality. And we can speak more about our links to Syria in the next question.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Yeah. Would you please speak about your relationships with Syria a little bit more and its peoples, and maybe a bit about you've already given a name to some of your political perspectives. I don't know if you want to go into a little more detail about how that developed. And I guess separately, are you in touch with people currently in Syria? I imagine Hossama at least might be.
Yeah. So I was born in Sueda city for the last 10 years before 2020. From 2009 until 2020, I was living in Damascus. And when the revolution started in 2011, I was also I was participating in the protest that was going on between Sueda and Damascus. And of course, my family, the close family, also the bigger part of the bigger family, they are still all in Syria. So I'm in a daily contact, I can say, with them. And with all the developments that are taking place. And also I have friends who are living in different parts also of Syria, from all the regions. And this also will help me, to also take the point of view of the people who are having their daily activities passing in Syria.
Yeah, my link with the region is more I was more in Palestine, and from 2013-14, I was there experiencing the uprising in the West Bank during the war in Gaza. And this led me also to be much more involved and interested in this region, to learn Arabic. And this is also the reason why we met with Kuzama. And since 2020, we met in Lebanon. And so I went to Lebanon and Syria in 2022. And also through the internationalist movement, I was in touch with quite a lot of people who are from, let's say, the whole region, not only Syrians, but also Palestinians, Lebanese. And also, people in the two parts of Syria, let's say the east of the Euphrates and west of the Euphrates.
Great. Thank you for that. Could you talk a bit about what life was like under the Baath Party of the Assads? What sparked the revolution 13 years ago?
So living under this very genocidal, this very sectarian regime, it was very difficult and something until now, I see it's hard to be imagined even for like many people when you speak about. From the time of the like Hafez al-Assad, the father of Bashar, he imposed like an ultra-authoritarian regime. There was no any political diversity. You can in no any way you can criticize the regime, and it was like a mafia or like a family clan kind of a regime, because like all the people who are in power, like the very elite positions in the government, it was like from the very close family of Hafez al-Assad. And after like they changed the constitution, so Bashar al-Assad, he can be a president in his young age in 2000. And I think a very good example or a reference like this is the book of Michel Sora. It's called The State of Barbarism. This writer, he was kidnapped in Lebanon in 86, and we recommend to read it. He was kidnapped from Hezbollah, of course, by the orders of Hafez al-Assad. And all the progressive left, like anyone who can have any like ideas, let's say, or like directions that are not going with the Baath Party, all these people, thinkers, they were or imprisoned, or they were forced to leave the country, or they left the country because they could not even have a normal life there. And there's also a writer called Yassin al-Haj Saleh. He is a Syrian Communist Party. He was imprisoned for 16 years under the Assad regime. And he wrote very, very interesting, very comprehensive articles about Syria, about the situation in the whole region of Syria. And there was a huge corruption. I mean, it was unbelievable. I mean, and there was a huge classification, between the people who are wealthy, the people who are impoverished. And somehow, it's not also only as it's known somehow that only the Islamists or the Islam religious people that, that they were repressed. Somehow everyone was repressed. I mean, he's saying that he's protector of the minorities, this regime, but it has nothing to do with this. I mean, he was repressing anyone who was just not going along with what this regime wants. And even from the Christians, even from the Alawites, even from the Druze, I mean, there's nothing related. It was just very, very sectarian, and also something very strong. It's that he created a very big mistrust between people, because there was lots of people called mukhbirin, because they're related to the secret intelligence. And these people, they were writing reports against anyone, against their family, against their neighbors, and they give it to any Baath Party really next to them or in their region, in their neighborhood. And many people, they went to prison. Many people, they were killed because of these reports. So this created a huge mistrust, between the Syrian community. And this is what the regime they wanted. Somehow they divided the population. So, and in 2011, the people, they went to the streets, and I mean, it was from the first big protest that happened immediately somehow, because the people, they immediately got en masse in the street. They were shot and with live bullets, and they were kidnapped, they were kicked, they were took to prisons in hundreds. And even after very few time, the regime, they attacked with tanks and with planes, even in Daraa and the first region that the first protest that en masse that got place. And this over the years, in spring of 2011, I can say many defectors from the army, they created the Free Syrian Army. And also after the Assad, he released all the Islamists, big part of the radical Islamists from the prisons. And this, we'll speak about it later, how it somehow changed radically, the path of the revolution that started in 2011.
Do you want also to speak about the first years of the revolution, or after the civil war, or you?
Yeah, that would be great. And I think it's also good to mention from an international but regional perspective too. This was a time when there had been uprisings in Tunisia, uprisings occurred in Egypt, in a lot of other countries in the area. And there seemed to be, from the outside, it seemed like there was an inspiration and hopefulness of an end to authoritarian dictatorships that had existed since, the decolonial movement started. And so I'm sure that this was influential to people taking the street saying, we see our neighbors doing something similar to this. Maybe we can do it too. Is that correct? The Arabs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. It was. I mean, I remember how we were sitting in front of the TV and we were saying just, it's the time. It's just coming, it's coming here. I mean, the people were just, unable to hold themselves. And somehow it's just like when, because it started when these children in Daraa and this southern governorate, they wrote on the walls like that, it's your time now, doctor, because Bashar Assad, he's a doctor, ophthalmologist. And it's, it was just this spark, and that created this mass protest after these kids, they were kidnapped and tortured in the Assad prisons. And even in Damascus, just before like 2-3 days, there was a small protest that happened in the middle of Damascus, in a very, very crowded neighborhood. So somehow the people, it was the people, they were just wishing this, that is just coming, and they could not believe, that this is happening anyway. So yeah, it was inspiring, of course.
And then I think it's also important to realize that from the moment he released all the Islamists from the prison, it was an attempt for him, because he was very confident before. Even he came to southern Syria to say, I'm the protector of the minorities, and to reassure the people that there's no reason for him to fall like other regimes, because the Syrian people likes him.
Because he thought that if there is an uprising it will start from this region, because it has a bit of specific situation, this region of the southern region and Sweden. But somehow it's
because there's a big minority, like the Druze. It's a government where 95% of the people living there, they are Druze, and they are considered as a brother minority to the Alawi, which Assad is belonging to this minority. And he really came to Sweden because it's a big threat also. If Sweden is defeating, is opposing him, it was a big threat for him, and he knew it. So that's why he came to say, I will never betray you. And he was beginning to say this speech also that the main threat is coming from the Sunni majority, the Sunni Muslim majority. And he was beginning, and this, when he released all the Islamists, it was also with this idea to put the blame on the Islamists, on the Muslim brothers, and so on. And he played this game for long years after, until recently, like Bashar was playing with the Islamists, like moving them from one place to the other, making agreements with them to remove them from one region to go to another, and so he could just play with them where he needed somehow them to change the balance of power.
But he was saying, like, or you choose me, or you choose this Islamist. What do you want? He was putting the people in this choice that is totally, it's not like this. It's just he was imposing this because he gave the possibility for all these radical extremists to exist and to be in a very powerful position, And these Islamist extremists, they were not fighting the regime. They were fighting the people themselves. Their victims, they were the Muslims themselves somehow.
And this is also, he knew also at some moment that this will also change the opinion, like the way the West and the international community will look at him and look at the revolution and look at the situation in Syria. Because he know that if this is developing, if the Islamists are developing and they are empowered, everyone will focus on ISIS. On the Islamists, and then first Al-Qaeda and then ISIS. And this is exactly what happened from 2013 and 2015. It's like the whole focus, the main focus came on ISIS on one side, and the only limit that was put to Assad, it was the use of chemical weapons. So it was the main condition. It's like somehow they sent a message to him. Actually, you can repress, you can kill, you can kidnap, you can make counter revolution. Just don't use these chemical weapons. And this is the only red line that was put by America, for example, on the Assad regime. And when he used the chemical weapons in 2013 in Ghouta, it's very close from Damascus, it brought the US to come into negotiation with him first. So when people, they rewrite the history and they are saying that the US, they use this as a pretext to bomb and to participate in the war, but actually they didn't. The US, they came to negotiate with Assad and to settle the situation, and sending some kind of delegation who would with the regime, hand in hand with the regime, agree on to stop using chemical weapons to remove them. Yeah. And this is how the US intervened first in the situation there. And in 2015, Russia also added an intervention, but it was with the excuse, like the US, actually. They got the same reason. The main motivation was to fight ISIS. The official reason was to fight ISIS. And actually, it's very interesting also to see this period, because Russia and the US in this period, they agreed on sharing the sky, for example, to fight ISIS. So they were basically collaborating and sending message to each other to say, like, I'm using the sky to attack this place. Like, so the airplanes, they will not crash together somehow. So they were, on one side, this deal was made with the Assad regime about the chemical weapons. And Obama in this period, he threatened Assad. He threatened him with bombing, but actually he never intervened against Assad. He was really happy to find a settlement. And then this is also this period in 2015, from 2015, when the US, they decided to back the SDF, to create the SDF and to back them with the main aim to fight ISIS. SDF, like the Syrian Democratic Forces, that they're also often believed to be majority Kurdish, but it's not the fact. The majority, like 50 to 70% of the SDF, they are Arab communities. And meanwhile, the US and Qatar, for example, they were funding al-Nusra groups related to Al-Qaeda, because it was a whole game about how to deal with the balance of power inside Syria. So somehow the Syrian people in this moment, they were left alone in their protest against the regime, and no one was looking to the regime barbary anymore. Because actually what we are trying to say always in our intervention is that the Syrian state, the Assad regime, was much more bloody than ISIS even. I mean, in scale, of course. It's horrifying what ISIS did, but in scale, the Syrian regime was much more horrifying. And the people at this moment, they were just basically left alone. And the country began to be offered to all the imperialist powers of the region and from the West. It means we consider that Iran, Russia, Turkey, they are imperialist powers here. And because we struggle also a lot with some campist point of view that consider only US and Israel, for example, as imperialist. But Iran, Russia, Turkey, US, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, they have an imperialist policy, and each of them, they have their proxy inside Syria since 2013-15. And basically they just created the civil war inside Syria, like cutting Syria in pieces to struggle for their own interests. And Assad was free to just repress and kill thousands and hundreds of thousands of people. And he kidnapped in mass. And many people disappeared. Like today, now that the regime fall, we know that it's probably like until 150,000 people who just disappeared and were killed and buried somewhere. So it's a huge prison complex, and we are not even sure that all the prisons were found today. So since 2020, it's also the thing that brought to the actual situation is that everyone looted so much this country that at the end, like more than 90% of the Syrians, they were under the level of poverty this year, and they are still now, because the situation is still the same with the sanctions and everything, because basically everyone looted the country, and Assad included. So and it's like the situation, like it's like this now, and there were just the region of Idlib and Afrin provinces that were ruled by Turkish support, by HTS and SNA, but we will speak about this after.
So according to Leila Al-Shami's blog, in August of 2023, there were demonstrations in dozens of, and I just say this because this is where I read it, and I'm sure it's been documented in many other places, but there were dozens of protests against the regime across many parts of Syria, echoing the chants and dreams of 2011. Despite this, from the outside, it appeared to many that the regime was pretty stable, but we recently had the joyous news of the fall of the Assad regime as he went into political exile in Russia. Can you talk a bit about, maybe since you've talked about some of the different forces that were involved in what became the civil war, how it went from what appeared to be a stable dictatorship into this new situation that we see now?
So somehow the regime, like after all these years of oppression and after all his corruption, like the policy of corruption, even the internal like affairs, it was rotten from the inside. And when the opposition factions, like the armed forces who were like taking the cities, liberating them. I mean, you see everywhere that the army, they were just fleeing, or they were just defecting, like to join them, or they were just like throwing their arms and just going back to their families, because even the army, the soldiers in the army, they had no purpose why they are there. No one. I mean, they were all like in compulsory military service. So somehow no one wanted to be there, and this is why also, I mean, you see that this regime, this it's built on nothing. I mean, it's a clan. So somehow they destroyed the whole community, and it was only their only support was Iran and Russia. Like they were the reason why the regime it stayed, especially in 2015 when Russia it helped Assad regime to bomb, in Aleppo and in Idlib. I mean, there was a huge bombing where they were trying to kill as much people as possible, because Idlib is the place where the regime, he gave the possibility to all the fighters from Damascus to leave. So he said, or you surrender here and you give your weapons and we see what we do with you, and possibly throw everyone in prison or kill them, or you go all to Aleppo and to Idlib. And they were all sent to Idlib, and after he gathered everyone there and he bombed them with Russia, of course they bombed them. And the Iranian militia with Hezbollah, I mean, they were doing all the other job everywhere else, I mean, with their militias. And in these last 2 years, I think, I mean, especially after the protest that broke out, like the uprising in Sweden, like since more than 1 year and a half, the people, they had enough, like they have nothing to lose anymore. I mean, the situation is very, very, very bad. And even you can hear in the streets in many cities in Syria that the people, they start saying things, like just the people that are so fed up, like they cannot take it anymore because it's not alive. And yeah, the protest that took place in Sweden also because it was led by this minority group that was always linked to the regime somehow wrongly. Which is not true, but it was seen like this minority, and they were already, everyone was on the street, and it was happening like, if not daily, it was happened weekly for the whole these like 18 months. So and there was this local armed faction that appeared in this region because to protect all the guys that they did not want to join the army. So they said, okay, anyone who does not want to join, we will protect them. And there was like something like 50,000 guys who did not join the army somehow, and they stayed in Sweden. Of course, they cannot leave this place, but this was the choice, and they chose to defend, I mean, their statement, what they decided to do. And another thing, something more like the international process, like the Astana process that happened, this conference that happened between Turkey, Russia, Iran, and the United Nations with the HTS, like Hayat Tahrir Sham. Because, like Turkey was like sending a lot of messages to Assad, like they want to normalize with him. And Assad, he refused to listen to their demands because they wanted also to keep all the northern region. They wanted to negotiate something anyway. The Assad regime, they refused, and I think in this process, Astana process, there was somehow a deal that was reached, like just to handle somehow the power, because I mean, Assad, he left somehow, and he was granted asylum, and he had the time to leave, and many officers, they had the time to leave, most probably all his family, they had time to leave. So yeah, and his allies, I mean, Iran was weakened by the Lebanon war, and Russia was weakened by the Ukraine war, and both these countries, they were also losing lots of money in supporting the Assad regime, who had huge debts, like since the 80s, even like towards for Russia and for Iran. And he started this mega empire for captagon trafficking to pay back. And this captagon empire that he made also was affecting a lot, like his relations with the Arab surrounding countries. So all these factors somehow it participated in weakening, like the Assad has no any support. And if you see in all the cities now in Syria, everyone is crying from happiness. No one wanted this regime. I mean, no one, I mean, not any person. So yeah, I think this somehow spoke a bit about how it came to collapse like this, just like in 12 days.
Could you talk a bit about the captagon and what it is and the economic role it played for the regime, as well as what it did to the region or to the country?
Yeah, sure. So the captagon, it was something. Something enormous. I mean, it's like more than 80% of the captagon around the world is distributed by the Assad manufacturer.
And it's like a stimulant drug?
Yeah, it creates hallucinations also, and it's a dangerous. It's a dangerous, and it's not very very expensive also. And it's like in these small pills. And they were very creative, and how to send it all over the world. And they had huge, like he created gangs somehow that they were affiliated to its intelligence services to manufacture these drugs in many cities in Syria. And these gangs were even spreading this drug inside the city itself where they are, also because this was destroying the youth, destroying the people in the region.
And it was also used a lot by the fighters. It's a very cheap drug. It means it's the one pill is very, very cheap and everyone can afford it. And it was very used to help fighters also to bear also the violence they were imposing to others, but also they were subject to. And Saudi Arabia was just one of the main target countries that was just overwhelmed by the captagon pills. I think what they say, like it's 50 million pills a year they were finding.
And the city
through Jordan.
I came from, because it's on the borders of Jordan. So Jordan bombed at some moment in the governorate in the southern Suwaida, because they were like targeting the drug dealers. Of course, they failed, but because it's also, they were trying to fight this traffic. And somehow they refused also the call from this local factions in Suwaida to cooperate with them, to say like, give us the name of the dealers and we can help. But somehow like the Jordanian authority said, no, we deal only with the government, the Syrian government. I mean, anyway, everyone knows that it's the government itself that's producing the captagon. But it created, huge problems. Like even in Suwaida, they were like a huge, big gang, that when they dismantled it, these local factions, there were
35 gangs.
Yeah, and the biggest, they were manufacturing. I mean, they captured their place, they found the equipment, they found the pills, and they were all affiliated with the military intelligence service. I mean, they had the facilitation to pass through the checkpoints. They have all military cards, so they could do whatever. And
given by the brother of Assad himself, like
Maher al-Assad.
Assad. He was the king of all this trafficking, criminality of the regime.
And actually, we don't know what happened to him, but his wife and his son, they left through Beirut airport, like just the next day of on the 9th.
Oh, that's crazy. I had no idea. That's Just reading the description on Wikipedia. I mean, I've seen mentions of captagon before, but it's not a thing that I'd come across. So during the Civil War, an autonomous region was opened up associated with the YPG and YPJ, a feminist libertarian eco-socialist administration in the Northeast, which is accused of having links with the Kurdish Workers' Party of Abdullah Öcalan in Turkey. Listeners may be familiar with this as the Rajava Revolution under what's known as the Democratic Autonomous Administration of North and East Syria, Danes, and their participation in the Syrian Defense Forces. Can you all talk about Rajava and the complicated relationship that this project has with various actors and communities from the Syrian civil war time?
Yeah, of course, we had a lot of discussion the last years with people who were living in a civil society in Rojava, people who were going to fight there, but also people who were living in the cities like Raqqa under, let's say, the authority of the autonomous region. And it's very complex, and the relation is I mean, between let's say the both sides of the river it's not easy at all, and there's a lot of things to solve. And also, I think it's also based on some mistakes that were made. I would say by the Western left also to believe to believe the whole story, the whole storytelling, let's say, of the socialist movement in Rojava. It's like when you take to the basics, Rojava should be defining the three cantons of Afrin, Kobani, and Jazeera, because these are the places where the Kurdish people are living. And so if you speak about Kurdistan or Syrian Kurdistan or Kurdistan of the West, you should speak like Rojava, you should include Afrin, Kobani, and Jazeera. But since 2015, it is defining a much larger region, including mostly Arab areas and communities. And this was the beginning somehow of the problem for other Syrians, non-Kurdish Syrians, to understand what's going on in Rojava and to accept also what's going on, because the PYD has its socialist agenda that is not necessarily shared by the Arab communities, and the autonomous administration was never transparent about its compromises and arrangement with the regime, with the Assad regime, because this is a fact, and many Syrians, they know it, they witnessed it. Even not only people living under the regime's area, but people who were living in Raqqa, Deir ez-Zor, or Manbij, they saw and they understood that there were necessary arrangement and compromises with the Assad regime just in the name of survival of the Kurdish community and the project, the socialist project. And also in the name of counter-terrorism, because somehow they had some agreements to say, we fight ISIS. You need also to fight ISIS. So somehow we have to find some agreements. And this is a fact. These are facts. And we know also people who were living in Aleppo, who were active in the revolution, and who are secular people. They cannot be accused to be Islamists. They were secular Democrats, and they were imprisoned by the SDF. So it's very complicated. And also because SDF was created with the US support to fight ISIS. So the majority of the Arab fighters, like this, I said before, 50 to 70% within SDF, they are not necessarily supporting the autonomy project. They were recruited to defend their communities, and they were happy to help, let's say, and they were included in something that is not part of the regime efforts because to fight ISIS, because there were no regime efforts to fight ISIS. So basically, like this majority of Arab fighters inside the SDF, they were not necessarily supporting the socialist project, and I don't know even if they were really asked about this. So it's also explaining why many they defected to the Free Syrian Army regularly in all this last 10 years, when the conflicts occurred, for example, in Deir ez-Zor province last year. It was just last year. There were conflicts within the community. It's very hard to distinguish who was to blame, and the SDF, they had good reasons, to arrest a commander that was involved in corruption and so on. But anyway, it was reflecting also much deeper problems between the socialist movement. Let's say I call it socialist movement because it's how we see it. We see it more like a socialist movement as a libertarian movement, but we can discuss it. We are free to discuss about this. But also many people, they defected from the SDF after the regime fell, like in the last 2 weeks, because they saw that their communities are finally freed from the regime, and they wanted to be part of the liberation of the country. So, and also there were this incident in Manbij where the Arab communities, they were contesting the new education curriculum that was implemented by the Kurdish authority, because the content was rather imposed than really discussed with the occupied communities, because they are somehow occupied, because they are Arab communities who saw a force in a situation, in a context where you cannot really choose a side like freely and choose your political involvement and so on. So they were occupied by the SDF somehow. So it's very complicated. For us, we are quite critical, and the authority of the Kurds and the US-backed SDF and Manbij, Raqqa, and Deir ez-Zor especially is considered by many local tribes and Arab communities as illegitimate. And it's not because they are backwards or Islamist or, it's just because they were not considered in their Arab identity also. So the focus on Kurdish ethnicity and the incapacity to listen to the Arab communities and to include them in effective democratic changes under this honest administration just broke the trust. And this is what we understand even more now that the regime fell on the other side. Many Arabs, they say, but they are going away from this autonomous administration because they don't really believe in it.
Because you had mentioned campism before and perspectives from the West or from the outside of what was going on inside of the whole of the country, and speaking about critiques of the way that parts of the Western left also engaged with the Rajava project, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about some of the different ways that you've seen whether in Europe or elsewhere, I guess the international left deal with different sides or approaches to Syria over the years, whether it be conspiracy theories about white helmets or the anti-imperialist line around like Assad.
So I would speak a bit because I think the left in the West, I mean, it's very, their position is very controversial, because it is very campist somehow, especially when it's related to Russia and to Russian imperialism, because it's always, like first you have the Russian imperialism and how they see that the Assad is not like at the camp with the Americans, so he's like necessarily he's anti-capitalist and he's a socialist and he's a communist and he's so he's against capitalism, and it's like, so he's either this or that, and the other like affiliation to him, it's like the axis of resistance, especially with the Palestinian struggle and what happened also like recently, and with Hezbollah, with Iran, like that he's considered also like the defender like of like the liberation of the Palestinian people. And it's like you see also like when you mentioned it's and this these are all lies. I mean there's nothing called axis of resistance. I mean it's very vast, this subject, so we'll not go in many details now, but Assad, he bombed the Yarmouk camp, which is the biggest camp for Palestinian refugees in the whole world. There were more than 600,000 people living there, and he arrested many of them. I mean, he cannot be supporting the Palestinian cause. And also like if you see like how the intervention of Iran in the region, it is an imperialist intervention, and with the Russian intervention, it is also an imperialist intervention, and it has nothing to do with being leftist or against capitalism or against American imperialism. It's not existing. It's about interest, what was taking place, and all the thing that will keep him staying in this position. It was okay,
I think it's very important to focus on the specific role of Hezbollah, for example, also, because it's seen as part of this axis of resistance with Hamas, and all the discussion around what's happening in Gaza was always focused on we cannot prevent Hezbollah from getting the weapons through the Syrian territory, because actually Hezbollah was Iran was controlling all the roads from the east to the west of the Syrian country. Because this is the way they could provide to their militias the weapons to the western part, to Lebanon and the western part of Syria. But this was not to support the Palestinian resistance, because these weapons were not really used against Israel to support the Palestinians. It was making always the situation of Palestinians even worse, because first of all, the Palestinians since more than 30, 40 years inside Syria and in Lebanon, they have any political rights. They never had any political rights, and the Syrian regime was participating and depriving the Palestinian communities from these political rights. They have no representation. They were only represented by some factions that were coming from Fatah and PFLP, but they were dissent. They were not from the main branches. They were, and these groups, they were supporting the regime. And when the Palestinians, they took part in the revolution in 2011, these Palestinian militias, they were shooting on their own people in Yarmouk, especially. They were shooting on their own people. And we have also other stories when the Syrian regime, the father of Bashar, he participated in letting the Christian militias during the civil war in Lebanon kill the Palestinian people living, like 2,000 people in the camp of Al-Zatar. It means it's Tal al-Zatar and Sabra and Shatila. But Sabra and Shatila was Israel committing the crimes, like Israel supporting the Christian militias. And in this specific camp in Tal al-Zatar, is Syria supporting the Christian militia in the massacre. So all this is wrong. And also, and the last argument, and I will not go much more on this, but the Hezbollah they were the main trafficker of captagon in Syria. They were the main militias involved in killing the opposition, and especially the secular progressive forces, the communists and the Democrats. They were just destroyed by Hezbollah forces, and Hezbollah was implanted everywhere. everywhere in Syria and controlling the territory. And also at the end, when you say that Hezbollah is resisting to Israel, it's also bullshit. Like what Iran and Hezbollah did the last year when it was the worst we could see for the Palestinian situation, like with this genocide going on. They just throw firecrackers. They just spent years sending firecrackers on Israel, knowing that the Iron Dome cannot be destroyed like this. So they were never really a problem. And yeah, just to finish, also two things that we realize now during the revolution, the last liberation of the country, the fall of the regime. There is one founder of the Hezbollah who spoke in the TV and said really clearly, he said Hezbollah was never involved in Syria for any other reason than to fight the people of Syria, civilians, he's even saying, to fight the civilians, the Syrian civilians. And so this is the reality. And now Israel is bombing everywhere in Syria because Assad was a protection for the northern border. It was a guarantee that the Golan will never be touched anymore. And when Assad is falling, immediately Israel is bombing everywhere in Syria because suddenly it becomes a threat. So where is the axis of resistance? It's a real question.
Yeah, and many also known characters, like they fall for this campism. Like even Noam Chomsky, he also was saying, that not defending, but somehow also like that because in Syria the Assad regime is affiliated with the Russia, not with America, so he's good. Even this very famous singer of the Pink Floyd band. I mean, he was also he was attacking like the white helmets and saying it's a movie made in some studios. I mean, it's also somehow it's very strange, to see that these people who support like very strongly the Palestinian movement and liberation to be very lacking of the understanding, the complexities of the area, not just to decide to choose a side. Maybe you don't to choose any side, just to understand what's going on.
And this is what the people in Sweden did during all the protests. They were protesting all the imperialism. They were criticizing all the surrounding powers, and they were supporting Palestinians. So if the people, they can do this, you don't need to side with one regime or one state. You can just side with the people who are like just solidary with their brothers and sisters in the neighbor country.
Yeah, I think that's a clear lesson to take away from this for sure. And thank you for stating it so clearly. The Final Straw is a proud member of the Channel Zero network of anarchist podcasts, and here's a jingle from another member of CZN.
KiteLine is a weekly 30-minute radio program focusing on issues in the prison system. You'll hear news along with stories from prisoners and former prisoners as well as their loved ones. You'll learn what prison is, how it functions, and how it impacts all of us.
Behind the prison walls, a message is called a kite. Whispered words, a note passed hand to hand, a request submitted to the guards for medical care. Illicit or not, sending a kite means trusting that other people will bear it farther along until it reaches its destination. Here on KiteLine, we hope to share these words across the prison walls.
You can hear us on the Channel Zero network and find out more at kitelineradio.noblogs.org.
If you want to support the Final Straw Radio, you can subscribe to our podcast via various platforms, follow, rate, and share our materials online, and learn more at tfsr.wtf. And if you'd like to fund our transcription work that allows for easier translation, more accessibility of content, and the zines that we produce from each interview, consider picking up some merch from us or making a one-time or recurring donation via PayPal, Venmo, Stripe, or LibrePay, or joining our Patreon to access early release content and other goodies via the links that you can find at tfsr.wtf/support. So an area of concern for many has been Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, apologies for the pronunciation, which grew out of Al-Qaeda, capturing territory, but at this point you don't express much concern that they'll act. Let's see. So my reading of your blog is that you don't express a lot of concern that they'll act a lot similar to ISIS, which they've been in conflict with for a bunch of years. What do you see HTS acting as? What do you see the role that they might play moving forward? How should people think about them, do you think?
So of course, I mean, it's somehow we look at the whole situation with cautiously, but what happened already is amazing, that this regime fall. But it does not mean, that we are careful and we are cautious. But also, like, from the other side, there was not very, like, let's say, daring is like actions that took place from like these HTS fighters and the factious, the other groups that were affiliated with them. And for example, I mean, they changed their discourse since they started, since they became to be like a group. So, for example, they were in open conflict with the Syrian National Army that was created by Turkey from 2017. And even the HTS, they were not in compliance, and they were not in agreement with al-Nusra before, and then with ISIS after. And even they were jailing many ISIS militants, they are against this extremism. And also when the Turkestan fighters, for example, in Idlib, in the northern province, they killed from the Druze minority there, the HTS, they arrested these fighters. So the SNA, the Syrian National Army that's supported by Turkey, they gathered most of the foreign fighters, including like the former ISIS fighters, but ISIS was not at all participating in this last, let's say, what happened, like the liberation of all the cities in Syria, because the SNA is in conflict with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, with the HTS, and they are like still they're under total Turkish control. And anyway, ISIS is not really. I mean, they're now maybe gaining more control over more areas in Syria, because they are using now this situation that is not still settled and not organized. There's chaos still in Syria. But yeah, I mean, the only few remnants from ISIS, they are trying to survive now in the desert, but they might try to gain territory more in Iraq, but this is still not clear. And especially now the situation it can be positive for them, because of the chaos. And also I think why they were affiliated with ISIS, because some fighters from these factions, like the liberating factions, they were seen with badges that has this called the Shahada, on their arm, the armbands, and this was wrongly considered to be an ISIS symbol, but ISIS symbol is something totally different.
So we're just wearing this Islamic.
It's Islamic, but it's not related to ISIS, because of course we are not denying that Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is a conservative Muslim. They have a conservative Muslim direction, but and they have many individuals. They can be very conservative Muslims, who still dream for an Islamic state, but somehow we think that this is not the agenda of the HTS, and somehow it's hard to be implemented inside the Syrian community, because the Syrian community, it has many ethnic groups, religious groups, and it's very, very diverse. And also the people through all these years, they gained big experience. They saw also the experience of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the HTS in Idlib, how it happened. So somehow everyone was taking lessons, And I mean, since they are now they took the power, they did not really make decisions or that are very horrifying, or let's say it's very conservative. Even they dealt with all the regions that they entered. It was very cooperative interaction with all the communities that are there, despite which communities they are, So this is something that people, they were very afraid of, that they will come and they will be harassing the people, but they are not harassing them. Although maybe some statements that come from some ministers that were appointed for this transitional government now that will take place, that will stay in power until March. Maybe some of them, they said statements regarding changing the constitution, or regarding the women's capacity, let's say, to handle high positions in the government. But the thing is that the people are immediately reacting and opposing what's happening, and also the people that are able now to go to the streets and they are demonstrating. So and there is no, let's say, opposition for them. There is not repression, that people, they have to say now, or they have to respect what this transitional government is doing. And when you see even this Ahmed Shara, what's his name was Jolani, but now he's not using this name anymore. That he also now he's inviting to have this national conference at the end of this period until March. So somehow, they are trying to absorb. But anyway, now you hear also many progressive left voices that are saying that we should, we should be careful. And we should come to this table together, to speak all together. And so somehow the people are aware, I can say, and they are not just, being naive, let's say, because they passed through a very, very huge, diverse, very hard, brutal experience. So this also is shaping the way that Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, how they are dealing with the people, because they are also passed through these changes. And somehow the people know they know more their rights, I can say, and they know how to demand it, and they are ready to go on another revolution if things turn very bad.
So there are many other groups and communities across Syria who've played various roles in upholding or resisting the Ba'athist Assad regime. Can you speak a bit about the SNA or ISIS or other forces that are participating on the ground, even if in many cases those structures aren't currently built up of just Syrians, obviously, they could be including a lot of people from abroad or from Turkey or what have you. How do these groups or other formations relate to various ethnic and religious groups in Syria?
It's the main worry is coming from there. How people who have no power, who have no militias, who have no really mean to resist with the arms, would resist if they are now targeted. It's the main worry, and the only problem is the whole West is questioning the Syrians in a period where they just need to breathe. And this is very hard because we see this now. Everyone, even in the family, in our families, everyone is oh, we are very happy, but, it's So there are many groups. It's not only that there are 10 groups. You cannot say SNA is 10 groups and HTS is 20 groups. It's at some moment in the Syrian civil war, there were between 2 and 400 groups. Yeah. Now it's, of course, much less. But anyway, there were many fighters, they were absorbed. And sometimes one or two individuals, they represent a group. So the main worry, I would say, and we agree on this, that the main worry is the SNA, is the Syrian National Army, because they are obviously still a proxy of Turkey. And their agenda has nothing to do with the liberation of Syria. Their agenda is different. Their agenda is including ethnic cleansing of Kurdish people. And not only Kurdish people, but mainly Kurdish people. So their agenda is to clean up the whole area that is along the Turkish border. And this is very worrying. And one of the focus would be, instead of finding Islamist or ultra-Islamist or ISIS fighters within HTS, everyone should focus on saying, okay, HTS, we keep an eye on them, but the problem is the SNA, and we have to stop the SNA, and we have to stop Turkey. And because the SNA is gathering, as we said before, is gathering the most radicals, including ex-former ISIS fighters who are still believing in this ideology. They are included in the SNA. And now the HTS is making meetings with the SNA. So you see a will for HTS to be legitimate for everyone, including this SNA. Even if they were in conflict before, even if at some point they hated each other and they were in competition.
And Ahmed Shara, this new transitional government, they also were thinking about granting citizenship for many foreign fighters who joined them, who were fighting with them. And this, for example, this is problematic because also some decisions, this is part of the cautious look at this new transitional government, because these decisions are being taken, arbitrarily, let's say, because these foreign fighters, what's their background? What's their ideology? What will they, for example, they will be able to vote after for example, if they gain the citizenship. So, and these most probably these foreign fighters, they have conservative mindset. So this is worrying, for example.
And this is also the thing that, it's you see that there is an attempt that they will do all their possible, HTS, and not only HTS, all the Islamists who committed crimes before. Jolani, he committed crimes also. So this is not what we are saying, that they became good. It's just that they are dangerous. They are conservative. We don't agree with nothing, what can be there. We just believe that there can be a balance of power, so they cannot do whatever they want. And because they are also under the control of all the imperialism that anyway again wants to to keep control on the situation.
And
we see that the efforts now of the government is trying to grant amnesty for themselves and all the foreign fighters, even thanking them for their efforts, while they were never coming to Syria to liberate people, but just to make jihad and implement the caliphate. So, for example, we saw all the Uyghur fighters coming to, and it's a real issue. The Uyghur, for example, is a real issue because you cannot just tell them go home, because what they're experiencing as a repression in China, we cannot say just go back to China. So somehow they need a protection, but they need to be disarmed and de-radicalized. I don't know if this is possible, if this is existing even. I mean, I don't like the term, but actually they are now in Damascus. And we saw also French fighters, and we know that these French fighters in these ranks, they were in the Islamic State, and they came like 7 years ago to kill and slaughter people. So there are all this, but just not to speak only about the Islamists. It's also in these many groups, there's such a diversity that even Syrian they cannot really see. And we can have just one example, like the militias from Swaida, the Duruz militia from Swaida, that you will never be able to accuse them to being favorable to Islamism, because they would be the first victims of Islamism. They were a strong part of this liberation movement. They came from the south. They had these groups coming from the southern military command, and a huge part of them, they were this Rijal Karami, that is a strong militia, and not only them, but all the militias from Swaida. So you have all this, and they will also not let the HTS do whatever they want, because they were part of the liberation movement. So,
and there are lots of meetings that are happening also between, like the communities and this like representative of this transitional government, and also this invitation to make this national conference that also like many progressive Syrian left also are asking for this, but they're also saying that we cannot make all these changes that we want in this very short period, like it's what happened in Syria is very particular. It was very hard, brutal experience. And the people, they need to settle down a bit, to understand this coming period, and to understand how to, to start to implement the civil actions, like in the civil, civil organizations. And slowly, like in 1 year or two, we can start, to speak about the constitution and how to change it and how to implement these very huge decisions, So it's also things, they need time. I mean, now many questions, there's no really clear answer to them. It's just also what happened this years that the Syrian people, they passed through. I mean, it was so horrible that now the people, they are just breathing, and just everyone, like outside, all the Syrians who are outside, they just want to come back just to see how it feels to be in Syria without being under the Assad control, It's something that needs a bit time to work on and to understand more also how the things are, because really even now things are developing very fast. But I mean, for me, I cannot but see lots of hope, in the coming periods.
Yeah. According to Wikipedia, some 6.7 million Syrians fled the country between the start of the civil war and 2022. And now the EU and other governing bodies hosting refugees have started changing their relationship claims of asylum from Syrians since Assad vacated the country. Obviously, this is a very complicated issue, but can you talk about what many in the diaspora are going through? What are you hearing from people that are returning?
So yeah, it's also, it's very related to where, because, and the Syrian people who left, who were displaced and who had to leave Syria, they, like, big part of them, they were in Lebanon and in Turkey and in Jordan, and also like another part is in Europe. So of course, if you see now the numbers, like many Syrians are coming back, mostly from Lebanon and Turkey. They are crossing the borders. They want to come back to their places because, their situation is bad where they are living in Syria, and the big majority of them, and in Jordan. They're living in camps. They're living in a very bad situation. So most of them, they want to come back. They want to participate in rebuilding their country. They want to go to be able even to see what happened to their places. I mean, many places, they are just on the ground. It's a rubble. But at least you are in this place where you know that you have rights, and you are not in somewhere else where someone else is just manipulating you and trying to get help in your name and trying to oppress you, and just like you are also under oppression from the people themselves, especially in Turkey and in Lebanon. I mean, the Syrians, they were harassed, and there were a lot, and in Turkey there were many incidents of killing from the Turkish community. So it was a very bad situation. And so many people here now are coming, even the internally displaced people. There's a lot also, like people who are they were in, like changed their city, like from one city to another. So also these people, they are just moving back. And the people in Europe also, the communities here, I mean, like I can see from the people I know, from my friends, I mean, everyone, like they want to go back. The people, they want to go back. They want to have this life that they are having here. They want to have it in their home, next to their relatives, next to their family. Of course, the Syrians who have families, they started families here, or they come with their children when they were young, and now since years they are at school, they have jobs. So it will not be the same, situation to come back immediately. But many people, they already, even from here, from Europe, they are going back, and especially the youth.
There's also this risk that we still will see, because immediately after the fall of the regime, some countries like Germany, they immediately say that they will not take new asylum cases. But there's also the risk that the one who got asylum at some moment, I don't know, we don't know in how much time, they will say, if they didn't got citizenship, like from one of the countries, they may have their residence or their refugee status removed by if they consider that Syria is stabilized. But we don't think it will happen soon, but we don't know, because they
don't have passport. They don't have their Syrian passport, and they will not have a passport for a European passport. So somehow you cannot leave even the European country where you are. You have only this travel document, and that probably for the moment now you cannot use it to enter Syria, even from Jordan or from Lebanon, or I think also from Turkey. This travel document is not allowing the Syrians that they don't have neither passports, like not the foreign one, like, or not the Syrian one.
And there's also this rule that if you come back to the country that you fled and you got asylum status in Europe, there is no guarantee that if you go back like spontaneously now, they will not say, but you came back, so you don't need any more refugee status. So that is a huge fear about what will happen. What will happen if I go back there just because I need to go, even not to stay. Just I want to see my families. And after, when I try to come back to Europe, they will tell me, but you came back, so it's fine. You can live there now. It's like
and immediately. I mean, they immediately, like the second day, they start speaking about like removing the refugee status or like stopping giving asylum. But I mean, there are people who are since years are now waiting. I mean, it's also like.
And you see also the representative von Leyen, who are representing Germany and Europe. She came immediately to Erdogan, and she said Erdogan is our best partner regarding immigration issues.
Of course.
So it's very worrying. It's like because Erdogan is not our friend.
But the problem is that Erdogan now, he's speaking as he's the sponsor or the guardian of the Syrian people, which is very, very, very awkward and very bad. I mean, because Erdogan, he was having very horrible policies regarding all the Syrian people who are trying to go to from Turkey to Europe, or all the Syrian people who did not get the refugee status in Turkey. And Erdogan also, he participated in opening the roads for all the extremists to come from Turkey to Syria to join ISIS, for example. So it's also, like many European countries now, they're speaking to Erdogan as he's, somehow in some way or another, like representing something related to Syria.
And sometimes he's fueling the genocide, and he pushed, he's pushing also HTS from behind, not to enter in any conflict with Israel, because this is also probably part of some agreements that don't touch Israel. So no one is anymore touching Israel, and they do whatever they want. And they are invading already part of the villages in the south, and HTS is just communicating that Israel is not the enemy. And Turkey is giving 30% of the Israeli oil is coming through Turkey. So there's all these things
that are not representing what the Syrian community would say, but this is part of the cautious side that we were speaking about.
And there's no guarantee for Syrians who come back that they will find anything to build a life in the coming 3 years, maybe.
Yeah, this cannot be clear from now.
Yeah, and particularly if the administration had just been milking the population and the economy had been decreasing over this period of time, and obviously like this many years of civil war and repression, it's not going to be a thriving situation that people are returning to.
No.
Syria has had complicated roles with various regional powers, which you're bringing up right now. Some of these examples, and the last 5 years, you've seen conflicts with Turkey and their fight against Kurdish forces versus neo-Ottomanist visions from their border, from Turkey's border, and Kurdish visions of an eventual Kurdistan, including portions of what is now Syria. U.S. support at various times of the Syrian defense forces in regions hosting oil fields, and the recent expansion into the Golan Heights by Israel with claims that they're going to be making permanent settlements there. Can you talk a little bit more about some of the foreign powers that are jockeying to change borders, to stabilize or to destabilize Syria? And one thing that kind of like pops into my head is the tomb of Suleiman Shah in relation to Turkey, which I think is kind of interesting. I don't know if that's a thing you can speak of. So Suleiman Shah was viewed as I think the father of the founder of the Ottoman Empire, and his home was in modern-day Syria, within the borders of modern-day Syria. And so Turkey has been attempting to claim that as a Turkish spot within the border, which would be a foothold within the borders of Syria. We don't have to get into that if that doesn't make sense for this conversation, but there's a lot to talk about anyway in terms of the other countries that have been mentioned.
But we somehow agree that Turkey is nowadays the main threat in Syria, and it's obvious like that Turkey wants to keep and gain control over the whole area in the north of the M4 road. You see this road that is cutting Syria in the northern part of Syria. So Turkey is mainly interested in gaining control on all this area, this buffer zone, as you call him, but it's this term is just horrible. It's just so he is interested about what's going on the north of this road, and he will do everything to get what he wants. And especially now that he is in this very strong position, he is the main threat. But on the other hand, when they say he wants to have a control on the political life of Syria, and he wants to keep a control on what's going on with the HTS and government, we are not really convinced about this. We think that just he needed this offensive to be launched, the HTS to go south. Somehow I think it's like a deal saying, HTS, you help us to launch the offensive against the Kurds in the north with the SNA. And you do whatever you want in the south. And Erdogan was not even, I think, believing that it would work so well and that they would conquer the whole thing, the whole territory in 10 days. But I think he didn't care somehow. He's mainly focused on the north. And this is why also he's bombing in the north and he's attacking Kobani now, because this is his main. And this is, of course, going into his very Ottomanic way of thinking. And the Turkish nationalism is very, very oriented in this rebuilding of the Ottoman Empire, and he wants to be representing the Muslim Ummah. He's speaking in the name of all the Muslims, even if he's just doing everything against the Muslim community everywhere. It's like, so he is a threat, but his territorial expansion, we don't think it will go beyond this road, which is already too much. I mean, it's not reassuring at all. We don't say, okay, it's fine, we can agree with him taking the territories in the north. It's not what we're saying. Just if people are saying he wants to invade Syria, for example, or he wants to control whole Syria, we don't think it's like this. We think he is mainly focused to remove the Kurdish movement. And I think he will have a huge resistance, and it will not work better than the last years. We don't think so. It's just, what will play a big role is also the involvement of the US in this case, because they are allies somehow. It's very contradictory, but they are allies. They are within NATO, they are allies. And there were some agreements in the past also around Kobani, when US forces, they just didn't back the Kurdish forces when Turkey attacked the northern Syria. So we need to see, because Trump, for example, he will be the next president, and he said, I don't care about Syria. he's really, I mean, he's stupid and we cannot trust him for a second, but he's repeatedly saying, and he's also under pressure of American people, of American society, that Obama promised to get out of after Iraq. There is a trauma also in the American society after Iraq, and they will not reproduce the same mistakes in Iraq. And already Obama said, we get out of Middle East. And I think Trump is also in this mentality, say, we get out. It doesn't mean that he will not try to push like American interest. And that's why they will keep supporting the SDF, because somehow they keep control on the oil fields, and especially in Deir ez-Zor, which is like 70% of the Syrian oil. And if Americans, they keep control in this region, somehow they keep control on the oil. And they won't. And Trump, he said this for some years when he was president before. He said like, actually, we will not leave Syria because we need, we would like to benefit from this 70% of the Syrian oil. So there's all these questions that are embedded in the same diplomatic negotiations going on now, and the position of America will also play a role. But the fear we have is that they will negotiate. They will all negotiate so that Erdogan can keep the northern part of the country somehow.
I think
what
should happen, I mean, it's the negotiation, but between like the autonomous administration and between like whatever government will happen to be in Damascus, you know, because anyway, like the enemy is the same for both, you know, and there should be, you know, because these the SNA, like this National Syrian Army that's backed by Turkey, that is mostly it's fighting with the Kurdish forces. They're not representing the Syrian people. They're not representing the Syrian community. And if you ask the Syrian people also about like what is the situation in the east, I mean, they're considered themselves as all, I mean, they're their community, they are their families, they are their friends, you know. So the thing is that there should be this negotiation between the Kurdish forces and you know, like whatever government will be in Damascus, because I mean, this what should happen when there will be this national conference. I mean, the autonomous administration should be, you know, like, and there will be there, I suppose, but they should reach an agreement, you know, to solve this issue, and the HTS should maybe, I don't know, like play also a card with the Turkish, you know, because I mean, I don't see, you know, the Syrians, they should decide between each others, and they should oppose this Turkish expansionism also that's taking place in the north.
And I think there's a huge question, and even a huge advice that we tried also on our very, very, very small level when we meet Kurdish friends and involved in also what's happening. Because, I mean, there is a social movement, there is a revolution, there is a progressive movement in Rojava that is not to contest, and we support this movement, and this needs to be not only supported, it needs to be defended, this project. But what we say and the advices we give since years, we try to spread around, is like the Kurdish movement should make huge efforts to make connection with the secular movements, the leftist movement, and the minorities of the rest of Syria, for example, the Druze, because they have to play on the negotiation with the HTS, but they have also to be involved in the power balance with the minorities who will have to challenge the HTS government now. So the most important now to preserve, to save what's going on in the eastern of the country is to make connection and to stop being always separated from the Syrian fate, you know, because this is the big mistake of the Kurdish movement, is that they were so focusing on their ethnicity. And even we say Kurdish movement. Why Kurdish movement? We don't speak about democratic, socialist or feminist movement, actually. We speak always about the Kurds, the Kurdish movement, the Kurdish. And they excluded themselves. They excluded themselves from the Syrian community, where everywhere in other places, for example, in Sweda, the Druze, they said, we are not Druze. It's not our Druze community. It's not Sweda that we want. We don't want autonomy. And when there were questions about, do they agree with the confederalism in Kurdistan? They said, no, because we consider this is separatism. And we are part of the Syrian people. And we have to build a community with all the Syrians. And we will not separate from the people in Idlib and Homs and Aleppo. We are all the same. We are one community. And the problem is that the Kurdish movement didn't do this. And now they're in very, very dangerous situation where the rest of Syria somehow, it's not that they don't care, but they say, but you wanted to be a part and now you are, it's like, so it needs to be very, very political and diplomatic efforts to regain the trust and the links with the rest of the Syrian community. And this is the only way you can oppose Turkey and the US interests in this region. You see, it's like, I don't know if it makes sense, but it's like from a revolutionary perspective, it's like the only way we can like really, because now we are stuck in this thing, like we are supporting the secular movement in Syria among the Arab communities, and there is no links, and we hear all the things, and we see a lot of somehow self-persuasion and believing in ideology and in propaganda from the Kurdish side by all the comrades in the internationalist movement, because it's also somehow campist. You cannot say, oh, my side, they do only good, because it's not the fact. It's not like this. So you have to be more humble and to meet the other communities and to hear what they have to say. Just one example. When I said before, we met the former mayor of Eastern Aleppo, he was imprisoned by the Kurdish forces. And we know
Aleppo was freed.
And we know also another person, I will not name now people because it's not the point, and I don't want to speak instead of them, but we know also someone from the Druze community who is very like secular and progressist, and he's communicating a lot against the Kurdish movement because there is a lot of misunderstanding. And until there is no meeting between the two sides of the river,
the communication links,
cannot work.
There's a big lack in this.
So the Kurdish communities, and I don't speak now about the socialist movement, the Kurdish community, they are under huge threat if this effort is not made in their name by their own representatives and political parties, movements from the left.
Because as Burning Country, which is the one book that I've read about the Syrian revolution and civil war, like points out, well, I guess you've already named this also, and to not directly like put revolutionary fervor into challenging the Assad administration meant that they were able to coexist with the dictatorship for the last 13 years while other people lived in exile or were tortured or killed or lived under the thumb of the Assad regime. And that's a hard thing to heal from and to build trust back from. It's complicated, I guess.
It is.
But the Druze communities also was always accused to be loyal to the regime because they had some kind of, not autonomy, they had no autonomy. And they were always considered as an area under regime control, but they were always opposing. For example, these 50,000 young people from Sweda that were refusing to join the army and protected by militias. There were a lot of confrontation with the armed forces of the regime. And somehow Sweda was never touched. And they benefited from the fact that they're a strong minority and that Assad could not attack them frontally because this would not be understood and this would break his own whole propaganda.
But they were the minorities protector. So.
But they were also accused to be loyal to the regime, and this is totally unfair.
Because there is part of the community, but they are not representative of it. I mean, in each community there is this. I mean, it's not like everyone is agreeing. Of course, not on one stance. But for the last 1 year and a half, the people, they were declaring very clearly what is their statement, like what's their position from the regime. And I don't know, I mean, we were trying to see if we can make links, between like the autonomous administration and with this movement that is taking place in Sweda, but it did not seem that simple somehow,
it's like people, they ignore each other.
Somehow.
What do you think comes next for Syria? Who has say in the transitional government? And do you get the sense of how things will move forward? What do you think needs to happen for the dreams of the Syrian revolution to be built? And also in what happens next, you see a situation over and over again where regime changes, but elements of the infrastructure stay in place. Yeah, this just happens all the time where the people that quote unquote know how things work, sometimes low level or mid-level bureaucrats will get to stay in positions of power or military operatives. What happens? What do you think is going to happen with the remnants of the Baath regime?
So first, to start from the end, for all the ex-military officers. I mean, this transitional government, they said that they want to persecute these people, and this is also the demands of the population. that these officers will be followed and they will be persecuted. And already there was 2, I think, big officers in the army that they were captured. But of course, there is still no very transparency about what will happen to them, in how they will be judged, because, it's still, this government is still not making all the duties of the Ministry of Justice or something. So somehow it's something that will be worked on, because also now the United Nations, they are trying to, for example, they are making a special commission just to deal with the question of the detainees in Syria. So they will follow many all the documents in the prisons, and also all these mass graves that are being now discovered. So this, I think, will lead to many names, because also the people, they're not only demanding for the officers, all the people who are affiliated to them, because these people, they are the one who give power to these people to practice their, their authority and their oppression. And of course, for the infrastructure, it's for somehow it's a priority there now, in Syria, because the infrastructure is somehow destroyed. Now, Iran decided to cut the oil from Syria, so there should be an alternative. And since now, I don't know, we were just speaking about the oil fields, that they're not exploited for the benefit of the Syrian people. And they're all the electricity stations, they need to be reconstructed, they need to be rehabilitated, even what's related to water distribution. I mean, there's many huge issues. There's lots of work of reconstruction to be done. But I mean, at least now, the foreign press can enter Syria. They're meeting with delegations that are coming from several countries, and the delegation from America will come soon also to meet. And the French delegation, they met with a civil society organization in Damascus, the last week. And there is this open doors to investigate all the crimes that are made from Assad regime, by the Assad regime. And the people are still gathering, making protests in the streets. Yesterday, for example, there was a protest that were demanding also that the people, they want a secular state, democratic state, to respect the right of the woman. And the people, they were free to demand,
On this aspect, I think we have to say that there were a lot of discussions since yesterday, because there were several protests that were called by different secularist movements. It's not really movements, it's groups and people. And they were gathering in different places. For example, in Homs, it was mainly focused on the freedom for women, and it was very grassroots with people who are more left also. So it was much nicer than in Damascus, where there were a lot of critics, because some people that we can call shabiha, some people who were defending the regime before, they were working in the TV, they were in the show business a lot, and they were artists, and they were complicit with the regime, and now they try to clean their face. So they come out to this protest in the name of secularism, and they speak out with a lot of confidence, as if they would not have support the regime. So there's now this new challenge for us, where it's already difficult as secular movements to have a place in all these discussions that are going on now. And now there's a part of the secularist movement that has to deal with the former Assadists, to kick them out, to name them, and to say name and shame, and get out or be prosecuted, but don't speak in the name of a movement, because it's also discrediting the whole secular movement, which is at this moment very, very dangerous, because if they want to deal fairly with all the minorities, we have still no any statement, no any guarantee that the people who are non-believers, so not from any community, or a community of non-believers, they are not included in the discussion. It's they shouldn't exist, because this is kufar, this is bad, you have to believe or if you are not Muslim, you are Christian, if you're not Christian, you are this. And so this secularist movement has to be listened, has to be part of the discussion also at the high level. And this is the whole thing. It's
But all these former supporters of Assad who are, they say that we did not knew, they say we were forced, but somehow many people, they chose, just at least to be on the side, not to participate in glorifying the Assad regime, and not to put themselves at risk of being detained, because no one wants this experience to anybody. But this is a challenge, because there are a lot of people, especially the one I spoke about before, the one who were writing reports, against others. Yeah, because it is scary, and I don't know if what happens will somehow change this mentality of the people. They will really be, this fundamental change inside themselves, or they will keep this, like just to glorify whoever comes, just to keep their position, to keep their easy life. So this is something also that I think as a Syrian community, we should know how to deal with it, because it should not be on a revenge basis, but most on a just, on a just position. And these people, they need to be persecuted and they need to be responsible for the things and the stands that they did not take beside their brothers and sisters, because now they're pretending to be. So yeah, this hypocrisy needs to be faced somehow, because it cannot happen again, because if all these people, they did not cooperate with the regime could never have stand until now. I mean, especially in the media, especially these small, reporters who are writing about everything. So even me, I find my name in one page, in one list, and for the inside university, they were everywhere. I mean, everyone was watching. So this cannot happen again. So this is why people, they need to be held accountable, for what they did.
Yeah, and there are several challenges around this secularity issue, this
and for
justice
the minority
issue.
Gender issues, the LGBTQ communities, the women issues. I mean, there are all these are questions that need to be put on the table.
And probably what the main blind spot will be the savage capitalism that will come with this liberation, because now you have all this delegation coming from Europe. Their main interest is private interest, is like investments, and they are already speaking of this. And HTS is already guaranteeing, which is totally in contradiction with their conservative views. They are already guaranteeing, like the Hezbollah was doing in Lebanon.
Promising free market.
They are promising already from now, even if it's no one said this. It's already they are promising to all their sponsors that it will be free market and you will come all here, welcome to invest in Syria. And this will be the blind spot, because it's too much. We cannot oppose.
But this is the thing, what we said also, we need to take time, it needs time for the people to realize, to understand, because now the people, they are in this euphoria also. I mean, they need time to settle, to think clearly and strongly about these questions that are very fundamental and very, very important. But yeah, this is from the main questions, because it cannot be, you cannot just introduce brutal capitalist economy where you will make even the division between the poor and the wealthy people even much more harsh, and the people will have much more poor life, So economical question is also something else.
And the resort will be a very, very sensitive area, because this is where all the oils is finding. And before the war, because before the revolution, it's very important also to remind this. Before the revolution in 2011, the main beneficiaries of the Syrian oil were Germany, Italy, France, and Netherlands. And now they are coming because they want to get back to their oil fields, especially because now they are facing Russia for the other part of their income. So
again, complexities.
Voila.
I don't know. I've never heard of a situation where people are really happy about the outcome, where there isn't criticism or critique, but I hope that there can be some sort of truth and reconciliation. Thank you very much, both of you, for taking the time to have this conversation. And if you could name your blog and any other projects that you think listeners would do well to educate themselves from moving forward on the situation in Syria.
So our blog is Interstice Fajawat. So we have our social media, mostly on Instagram and Twitter. We also have Facebook, and we have our own website. And this is the project we're working on since more than 1 year now.
And so how you would say this in English properly? It's like interstices with this this how you say this tire. This from the sixth number. How this tire? How you say this? This in between, it's very hard to work.
Yeah, I mean, interstices.
You can write it down, so
it'll
you can
be in the
read
blog. We'll put a link for sure in the show notes.
And also there are other resources, where people, there are also some articles in English. There's a website called Al Jumhuriya. Also, we can write it down here.
Yeah, I don't know.
But there was an essay about how the Western left had failed
Yeah.
the Syrian revolution, and that has a lot of different authors, a lot of different moments, and a lot of different titles that people could research from if they'd like to, like book titles and articles.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
The tone is a bit aggressive, but because we needed it.
It's okay to be angry.
Self-critic is very important.
Thank you both so much for having the conversation in English. I very much appreciate it. And I look forward to reading more of your blog.
But thank you for hosting us, also for giving us the platform. This is also, we appreciate this a lot.
Yeah, my pleasure. And now some words from anarchist prisoner Sean Swain.
I would like to have a frank discussion with all of you about language. I think language is now in crisis, seemingly encircled and attacked from every direction. A steady, necrotic deterioration of meaning and substance that leaves language hollowed and dumbified. Now, to be clear, I was originally going to talk about Supermax Christmas. We celebrate Christmas by being locked in a space the size of a bathroom all day. The only events are the food slot opening for breakfast delivery and then for lunch delivery, along with a paper bag of peanut butter sandwiches for dinner. Very uneventful. We don't even get showers. Merry Christmas. But then I came across the prison memo that described Christmas as a no movement day. No movement day. A euphemism for lockdown. But they don't say lockdown. They don't want us to feel like we're on lockdown on Christmas. It sounds so harsh and cruel. A Christmas lockdown. Who would institute a Christmas lockdown? What monsters could do that? So the Christmas lockdown becomes a no movement day. And that's when I got on my language kick. Government, more than anything else, is responsible for the deterioration of language. Government loves its acronyms and euphemisms that make us dumb just by hearing them. The acronyms annoy me. There used to be a president of the United States. Now it's POTUS, an acronym. We don't have the time or the energy to say the whole thing, President of the United States. We have to abbreviate it to a two-syllable acronym, POTUS. And the Supreme Court is SCOTUS. SCOTUS. That doesn't even sound like an agency of governmental authority. To me, SCOTUS sounds like it should be that space between your genitals and your rectum that might become inflamed if you have an adverse reaction to a designer diabetes drug. You know, consult your doctor if you experience inflammation of your SCOTUS or if your POTUS remains erect for longer than 4 hours. Acronyms, but euphemisms are worse. Everyone around me now says, copy that. I hate it. What is the allure of copy that? Just tell me you hear me. Just say, yep. Copy that is a way to express that you officially hear me with your official ears and in your official capacity and not in your human capacity. As far as I'm concerned, you can shove your official capacity straight up your six. Another stupid euphemism. Then there's stand fast, another government fabrication. Stand fast is the official command to wait. Stand fast. Half truth, half optimism. The standing part is real. The fast part is just wishful thinking thrown in to make you feel like something is happening while you're standing there. Just tell me to wait. I'm a realist. I hear people peppering in official speak into human conversations. How about at that point in time? Yeah, at that point in time. Words you expect to hear in a police report. Useless words. At that point in time, the subject drew a weapon. You don't even need those words. You could eliminate them and say the same thing. He drew a gun. Everything happens at a point in time, you know. Time is constant, linear, and unidirectional. We never need a reminder that time was operating when this or that event occurred. You can just leave time out of it. It wasn't time's fault. Or how about official measurement of distance? Clicks. It was several clicks away. That's meaningless. Distance isn't measured in clicks any more than time is measured in boings or weight is measured in whammos. A click is a sound effect, not a distance. Stop using it, please. And that brings us to abbreviations, a popular and fashionable thing that everybody must quit immediately. Convo for conversation, or sitch for situation. Life is moving so fast we no longer have time for 4-syllable words? Or are we just trying to preserve that 0.00005 calories we would spend if we articulated the whole word? Are we really that concerned about preserving our fat storage in the event of a zombie apocalypse, hoping that saving that 0.00005 calories will keep us alive an extra 0.2 of a second after the zombies attack? Let's just finish the words. It would make me a lot less ag. But it has also become popular to add useless and unnecessary syllables. I hear this a lot. Resiliency. People talk about someone who perseveres as having resiliency. Is resiliency in any way qualitatively different than resilience? Does the extra Y turn resilience into something extra? Please keep the Y. Save those calories you'll spend by articulating the entirety of situation or conversation. Just roll with resilience and just stop having convos. Don't get me wrong. I'm not opposed to change. I'm not getting conservative in my old age. I embrace changes to language. Language is, after all, an organic thing, and change can reflect the inclusion of new perspectives. But the changes have to contribute to meaning or substance, not to intellectual laziness. Language should elevate our thinking, not pull it down. Which brings me to my last issue on this. More a way of speaking than language, but it all goes together. And that's the trend to get creaky. I know you've heard it. It's where someone gets toward the end of an idea and they start to creak like they ran out of energy. It's like they planned for that paragraph to only demand so much from them, and then they have nothing left at the end. I notice this creakiness is most prevalent among bougie people carrying miniature dogs that shake so hard they vibrate. Perhaps those little vibrating dogs are sucking energy? I don't know. All I know is whatever's causing it, I need it to stop. If you know one of these creaky people, please share with them an invention that can increase their energy levels through to the end of every paragraph. It's called caffeine. I swear by it. So, if you have a New Year's resolution so far unspent, do me a favor and dedicate yourself to purging these dummy bombs from language. And stay caffeinated. This is anarchist prisoner Sean Swain from the super duper uber mega ultra hyper turbo multi maxi max in Youngstown, Ohio. If you're listening, you are the resistance.
You can still write Sean at his new old new again address at Sean Swain number A243205 OSP Youngstown 878 Coatesville Hubbard Road, Youngstown, Ohio 44505. You can find his past writings, updates on his case, hear his past audio, find out how to get his books, plus ways to contribute to his legal defense fund at seanswain.org. This is The Final Straw Radio. This show will later be archived at thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org, and you can email us with questions and suggestions at thefinalstrawradio@riseup.net or thefinalstrawradio@protonmail.com. If you'd like to use any episode for your project or radio show, feel free to do so. Just send us an email to let us know. If you care to, you can send us letters at TFSR, P.O. Box 6004, Asheville, North Carolina, 28816. Programming support is brought to you by Firestorm Books. Located at 1022 Haywood Road in West Asheville, Firestorm is a bookstore and social movement space owned by its workers, in operation since 2008. Their event calendar and complete catalog of books can be found online at firestorm.coop.